The Long Con, Part 2. Starlight ignored her.
Of course, everything would have been for naught if Cozy Glow had actually succeeded in her foolish little plan. I took it as a sign that it was time to move and get things rolling. After all, now I knew that your little band of students could wield the element of harmony.
She narrowed her eyes and grinned.
And, thanks to our counseling sessions, I could wield your students. The elements could now be safely removed from the board, and the next step was to recapture your friends' minds. Even without the elements, I knew they were a force to be reckoned with. Casting my modified Compella spell was easy enough, even with that stupid little block that you put them on.
She cocked her head.
Interesting that you put that in place after my little incident. Are you sure that there wasn't some part of you that still didn't trust me?
Twilight said nothing. She just looked at the clock again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I boring you? I'll just get to the best part.
Twilight looked back.
Sorry, I zoned out there for a moment. Please continue.
Starlight snorted. She wasn't enjoying this nearly as much as she'd been expecting.
Well, I mean, you should know the rest by now. How I cooked up that little story of an equalist uprising in the east to get you out of the way, then removed Discord from the board by persuading Fluttershy to devote herself to him completely. After that, I just had to command Sunburst, already under my control, to magically seal off the Crystal Empire for a year or so. Just long enough for me to consolidate control. I even made sure that the pillars would be there by inviting them to a special ceremony in their honor. Once they return, I'll have all the support I'll need to force Cadence to concede. Your family isn't in danger, I promise. They'll be free to remain and rule in the Empire, so long as they don't attempt to rise against me. That taken care of, it was a simple matter of grabbing the Alicorn amulet from your storeroom.
She lifted her head to show off the cape's new clasp, the jewel glowing a dangerous red.
Thanks for the key, by the way. With this magnifying my already impressive powers, I overwhelmed Celestia and Luna's minds and equalized them.
Starlight clapped her hooves.
Everything was proceeding perfectly, and after all my years of planning, but, as you might have guessed by now, I couldn't just declare myself as the new monarch. There'd be anarchy. No, I had to convince Equestria as a whole that my ideas were the only way to succeed, and that I was the only hope for my survival that Equestria had. I needed a threat, only one that I could overcome, and for that, I deployed my secret weapon.
She smirked.
Spike.
Twilight's eyes widened.
Where is he? Safe. Tucked away until I need him again. Even I'll admit that using him to goad Ember and Thorax into all-out war was a touch cruel, but I suppose the ends justify the means.
She tapped her chin as a new idea popped into her head.
You know, come to think of it, he might just be the key I need to turn the Crystal Ponies against Cadence. Imagine, Spike the Brave and Glorious preaching the merits of equalism.
She almost cackled at the idea.
And, in the end, the dragons and changelings went to war because each thought the other was holding Spike against his will, and you, using the amulet, cast a shield over the whole of Greater Equestria to keep us out of conflict.
Twilight's inflection was monotone, like she was bored.
You repainted your equal sign, declared yourself Equestria's savior, and used the princesses to declare equalism as the only way to be saved.
Starlight's grin faltered.
And of course, you captured me as soon as I returned from the east and snatched my cutie mark before I could think twice.
Twilight was smiling now.
Did I miss anything?
Starlight ground her teeth. This was all wrong. Twilight should have been groveling at her hooves by now, marveling at the intricacies of her plan, the depth of her cunning. She should be crying to the heavens about how truly she had been outsmarted. So why did she look so blasted smug? Twilight clapped her hooves in a sarcastic way that looked to Equestria's new ruler as almost familiar. Starlight, I have to congratulate you. You covered almost every corner. You played nearly the perfect game. Starlight's rage exploded. There's no nearly about it! My plan was perfect. I've won! I beat you! Twilight shook her head as she looked to the clock again, just as the bells told midnight. You made one fatal mistake. Starlight's magic lashed out and destroyed the clock. And what mistake would that be? She heard the door opening behind her and turned to berate Celestia for entering without being summoned. Too late, she felt a familiar magic seize the amulet from around her neck and tear it away. You left the queen in play. Starlight recognized the voice and screamed as the green-eye beast fell upon her. She struggled as the magical cocoon was sealed around her, blocking her magic as she fired off every spell that she could think of in desperation. The viscous fluid in the cocoon sapped her magic and her strength, and soon she could do little more than babble in an insolent rage. She watched as her captor stood to her full height, clearly starving but still very powerful in her own way. Queen Chrysalis smirked down at her prey with utmost satisfaction. Twilight jumped off the bed and approached the cocoon.
You know, I've never really had an opportunity to study these. From the outside, I mean. May I have her now?
Chrysalis licked her lips.
I've waited so very long for this. Not yet.
Twilight tapped the outer membrane and observed its resiliency.
I need her rational enough to tell me where Spike is. After that, she's all yours.
Chrysalis leered over her prisoner and smirked as the pony shrank from her gaze.
I am going to have my vengeance upon you at last, Starlight Glimmer. First, I'm going to break your mind.
A flash of green fire appeared, and it was the great and powerful Trixie in her place.
Then, I'll feast upon your love.
Starlight shrieked in silence as the former queen of the changelings resumed her natural form. Twilight continued to study the cocoon.
You should find Trixie in one of the towers, get her to show you where they've been storing cutie marks and set them free. Once the princesses and I have quelled the fighting beyond the barrier, you're free to take Starlight and go.
With a nod, Chrysalis practically skipped from the room. She poked her head back in for a moment, shifted herself to a perfect double of Starlight Glimmer, and winked at the original before she set off to complete her task. Her curiosity sated for the time being. Twilight sat heavily beside the cocoon and shook her head sadly.
I really am disappointed, Starlight. Did you really think I wouldn't find it just a tad suspicious that all of my friends were suddenly too busy to come quell a sudden equalist uprising?
She sighed and stretched her wings.
So, I left the Cutie Mark Crusaders with instructions to keep an eye on things. Sweetie Belle and Applebloom have already come to me and told me of a sudden change in their sisters' behaviors. They managed to get the word to me, and in an instant before you sealed off Equestria. Once I realized what you were up to, all I had to do was locate Chrysalis and set up my own rescue before I allowed you to capture me.
Twilight looked at the chair Starlight had been sitting in, considered, and then claimed it for herself with a flap of her wings.
Those blocks in the girls' heads weren't there to protect them from you, by the way. They were a precaution against any pony else possibly doing what you'd done. I was actually quite thankful that you'd opened my eyes to a threat that I hadn't considered before.
She floated over to the alicorn amulet and observed it.
You were an excellent student, Starlight, and, I thought, a good friend. I truly believed that you could be better than who you once were.
Starlight only glared.
We're so alike, you know? I mean, this whole plan of Chrysalis coming to my rescue was based entirely on my knowing exactly what you were planning. I knew that you would depower me and then come visit, simply to lay out the brilliance of your scheme, because that's exactly what I would do in this situation. If you were really the brilliant tactician you claim to be, you would have just stolen my mind or executed me, but no, you had to gloat, to rub my nose in my failure. You're still the same mayor who tried to change history just for a little payback.
She laughed lowly.
You sat here and bragged your years of planning. You're preparing for every outcome, Starlight. I might be the Princess of Friendship, but I am the undisputed Queen of Preparation.
Starlight tried to attack, but her strength was gone. She bared her teeth, ignoring the taste of the fluid that flooded in her mouth, but wouldn't drown her.
I'll clean up your mess. I'll select another student and hope that it works out this time. I have an entire school of ponies to choose from now, after all. Your spell is easily reversed, by the way. I cooked up the counterspell the night after you first cast it, in between dinner and dessert. The girls and the students will all be back to normal in no time. I'll have a word with Discord, but I'm sure we'll all forgive him. This is just the kind of thing that he does from time to time.
She tossed the amulet away like a piece of costume jewelry and narrowed her eyes.
It will take some time to fix this issue with the dragons and changelings, however, make no mistake, I can fix it, with the girls' help of course, but it will be even easier with Spike. You'll make this a whole lot easier if you just tell me where he is.
Starlight glared, doing her best to will the universe not to steal her victory. Not when she'd been so close. Twilight shook her head.
Oh, that's fine. I'll just cast your little custom spell and you'll tell me everything I need to know. Oh, and more. So, while we wait for Chrysalis to get my magic back and probably snack on your consort, if we're being totally honest, why don't I try to impart one final lesson, from teacher to student?
She leaned forward.
Friends come in all shapes and sizes. You can be friends with almost any pony, if you give them the chance. You can even make friends with some pony who was once your greatest enemy. Just look at the Crusaders and Diamond Tiara. But here's the really wonderful thing about friendship. Even if you can't really be friends with an enemy, you can still put your differences aside to work towards a common goal. Then they become... oh, what did you call them? Oh, right. Allies.
There was soon a flash of light and Twilight's familiar Starburst cutie mark reappeared on her flanks. She let out a sigh of relief as a magical glow flooded her horn. Starlight's eye twitched as the familiar glow of her own spell began to manifest over Twilight's head. Twilight took one last look at her former student, profound disappointment etched on her face.
To put it simply, Starlight Glimmer, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Starlight closed her eyes to the glow, willing herself to wake up from this nightmare. And she started to awaken with a gasp, looking around wildly. She was still in the throne room. The lights had gone dark, and she was all alone. She must have fallen asleep before the dance had ended. She shuddered as she recalled the events of her dream, and it had all seemed so... real. She heard hooves approaching and turned, smiling as the pony she most cared about approached her.
Hey, sorry, I must have celebrated too hard. Oh, nothing to worry about.
Trixie offered a hoof.
Come to bed?
Contentment and love filled Starlight's heart. It had all been worth it. She'd won. She'd beaten Twilight Sparkle at her own game, and now she could enjoy the fruits of her labors. Now she, together with Trixie, could guide Equestria to the brighter future it deserved. Her hoof touched Trixie's, and she felt the love draining from her. For an instant, she saw past the illusion, saw the dank cavern that was now her prison. She saw a flash of green in the unicorn's eyes. She knew that she'd lost, and she screamed.